This is the Book Legion Podcast, where we review thought-provoking books to give our Legionnaires the knowledge they need to dominate the next level of their life.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining me on the Book Legion. My name is Tyser Evans. This week we're going to be reviewing Patrick Bet-David's new book, Your Next 5 Moves. So first I want to start out with who Patrick Bet-David is. So Patrick Bet-David was born in Tehran, Iran. His parents decided to flee Iran because of the Iran-Iraq war back in the 80s. They fled to Germany in 1987, where they stayed there a couple of years and then immigrated to the United States in 1990. Now, he had a really difficult childhood. His parents had a hard time getting a foothold here, being immigrants, not speaking the language, not understanding the culture. So Patrick got into trouble. A lot of trouble actually during his youth years, and was able to turn it around. He joined the Army out of high school, was in the Army for several years, which kind of gave him a sense of discipline and a sense of how to accomplish a mission, which all that would play into his later life when he started his insurance agency. So he went into the Army, then he got out and got into personal training, and then he got into sales, where he became a great salesperson and a great sales manager working for a big insurance company. He had a bit of a falling out because he was very forward-thinking. And if anybody knows insurance, which I do, I've been in it a long time, which was I was so interested in reading his book. It's a very old industry that does not like a lot of change. And so he saw a better way of doing things. The company didn't buy into what he had proposed. So Patrick went and he recruited 66 agents to start his own agency and launched right in the middle of the Great Recession in 2009. He started his agency, PHP, which now is widely known. It's one of the largest agencies in America. I think they've got over 10,000 independent brokers across the country. So going from that 66 to over 10,000 now in a span of 12 years is unbelievable, his journey to be able to grow that fast. That's why I was really interested in reading the book. The book is predicated on your next 5 moves. He really wants people to start, the analogy he uses, start thinking like a grand chess master, right? So a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business people, they operate either they don't even operate thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead, or they might only be thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead. And if you are in a very competitive marketplace like insurance, it behooves you to start thinking 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. So that way you're never trailing the competition, or you're not having to compete, you're dominating the competition. So what I'm going to do now is jump into my favorite 3 chapters of the book. So the first chapter I want to talk about is just chapter number 1, which is who do you want to be? This chapter was great because it sets the precedent right away of not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. So he talks about, who are you? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an intrapreneur? Are you a solopreneur? And so I want to kind of discuss a little bit because I love this concept of an intrapreneur. So an entrepreneur is just like that. There's someone that has a large vision. They want to create a large scale company. They want to have people underneath them. They're going to want to have segments of their company, right? They're thinking of a big vision. They want to have a big company. That's typically when you think of an entrepreneur, what you think of. Now, an intrapreneur is someone who works for the company, is invested in the company just like an entrepreneur, but is not their company. So this could think of like a COO, a CFO, or just even it could be someone as a salesperson or a sales leader or an HR person, but they're really ingrained and bought into the core values of the company. There's someone who's going to be an evangelist for your company. There's someone that's all in on your company, although they are not the ones that founded it, started it, and maybe don't even run it. And you have a solopreneur, which is someone which we most often see in the United States. I want to say that's like 85% of people out there are sole entrepreneurs. That just them, they're doing probably less than $1 million in revenue. It's just them by themselves. They don't have an assistant. They don't have any help. It's just them out there doing their thing, either a consultant, something like that. So he drives down to the specifics of looking at the scope of everybody you could be within an organization. Do you want to be an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, a solopreneur? He goes into, do you want to be a salesperson? Do you want to be a CEO? Like, who do you want to be within the scope of the business? And once you define who you are, what your skill set is, it sheds a lot of clarity on then how to start analyzing your next 5 moves. And when it comes to, where you want to be in business, what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? What vertical are you in? And so he wants you to get really, really clear on your skill set and your desire and who you want to be within the scope of business, where you fit in. And then you need to start digging in on this concept of looking at your next 5 moves. So the next chapter I want to talk to you guys about is chapter 4, the incredible power of processing issues. So he has a great concept, Patrick Dove, looking at issues. So he goes ITR, so it's investment, time, and return, right? So anytime he encounters a problem, or he's trying to look for a solution to a problem, or a problem that he might foresee arising, he wants to look at what's the investment going to cost us and or save us? What is the time it's going to have to put in, or what's the time it's going to save us? And then what is going to be the return on the time and money we put in? Is it going to help us or hurt us long run? And he gave really good concrete examples. One of the things he does throughout the book is he gives you real life examples of things that he went through in his business and how he was able to overcome them. And one of the things he talks about when it came to ITR, he was talking about a new software technology that he wanted to implement, and it was going to cost double the amount of what he thought, but it was going to expedite their ability to have a new CRM system, I believe, put into place twice as fast. So they did the analogy breakdown, and when they first looked at the numbers, it didn't seem like it would make sense over the course of the first 2 years, but then when they broke the numbers out and they looked at the next 5 to 10 years, the investment actually they have a much larger return when compounded the time. So they moved forward and put up more money than had ever anticipated, twice as much money than anticipated, to put in this new software system. So again, he takes this principle, he looks at the issue and goes, okay, well, he's all about speed and efficiency. How can we have speed, efficiency, and execute? And then, be willing to take the money to put it into practice to solve those issues. But it's also looking at, is the time and money that we're going to spend going to be worth it in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years? Does it make sense for us to do that? If it does, I don't care how much it costs, because if eventually it's going to make us money, it's going to speed up our execution, speed up our processes, help our people, help us get to the top faster, then absolutely we need to do it. So he has a very clear path. I see this all the time in organizations that have billions of dollars that just stifle at making decisions because they're thinking short-sighted of, is this going to impact the dividends for the next quarter for the investors, as opposed to realizing long-term strategy is always going to be your best play if the ROI is going to be there in the next 2 to 3, 4, 5 years. If it makes a significant difference, if you taking market share, you have to spend the money and execute and spend the time and the people to invest in the technology. And that's something he does very, very well, where a lot of organizations do terrible. They're very scared to pull the trigger on an investment because they don't want to spend the time and the money to do it. But by not spending the time and the money to do it, they get behind in the marketplace and then have to scramble and pivot or go out of business. So chapter 4 was a great way of looking at how do we solve issues in a way that makes sense coming from a very practical business standpoint. So the last chapter I want to talk about is chapter 7, which is create a principle-based culture. And he took a little bit of his own style and technique from things he liked and he didn't like, but he talks a lot about Ray Dalio, who is the founder of Edgewater and Associates, what is the largest hedge fund in the world, if you don't know that, who Ray Dalio is. They're like a $160 billion hedge fund. You gotta have like $5 billion and throw down $100 million your initial investment to work with Ray and Edgewater and Associates. But they have a really unique, super radically transparent culture. And oftentimes, again, having worked in corporate culture myself, is what you tend to see is, one, employees don't know the core values of the culture. It gets lost over time, especially as it starts to scale. The mission and the company culture, the core values tend to get very skewed, not understood. It kind of just becomes a thing that you read in like your manual you get from HR when you start, but it's not something that's really important. Then also what you see a lot in corporate cultures is this really weird layer of like secrecy. And having been in middle management a long time for a lot of big companies, typically what happens is like, oh, well, the VPs can tell me a little bit, but they got a little bit from the CFO, the CEO, or CEO that they don't want them to share with us, so they hold on to stuff, but they can share a little bit, and they say, don't tell this to your guys. So it's like this big chain of like secrecy. A lot of times with organizations that I personally can't stand. I think it's highly ineffective and creates this like weird shadow corporation in the background that like your employees know that you're not being honest, but then you also know your boss is not being honest and telling the full story. And we really don't know why. I mean, I guess some things, maybe if there's going to be an acquisition, you got to keep closer to the cards because of, stock purposes and whatnot, but I never get it. So I really love this chapter where he talks about making sure that you have a core company code that people understand or bought into and is throughout the entire ecosystem. The second thing is he's radically transparent about all of his moves. There's nothing hiding within his organization, which when you do that, you empower people to feel entrusted. You know, I always tell people is like, hey man, I'm managing adults. I'm not going to treat you like children. Like you're all adults. A lot of people that I work with, they got kids. So I need to treat you like a child when you're raising children. So I really loved this principle of being radically transparent, having people buy into a core mission. I think he got a lot of this from being in the Army. What the military does really well is, yes, at some levels you already need to know, and that can be important, right, with classified information. But what the military does so well is they have a mission, and everybody understands how they play a role and they play a part into accomplishing the mission. Most companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, all of which I've worked for, do a terrible job at this for the most part, have having their people understand how they're an intricate part to their system and to their company. And what they do not set a clear mission. The people working for very segmented, so they don't understand. Someone in marketing, someone in sales, someone in human resources, and someone in processing, they are, in receiving, they all don't understand that they have one core mission together and that they're all playing a piece to the mission. Like in the military, if you're the radio guy or the infantry guy or the tank guy, you all understand what the mission is and how you're a part of the mission. Well, organizations do a very terrible job of this, like I've stated. Well, his company does a great job of this, and that's how they've been able to scale and grow so quickly. And there's a whole section in there on scaling, which I'm not covering here, but he gets into that as well. So I just really took a lot away from this because for me, having flipped 7 sales offices, the only way I've done that is by creating a good ecosystem inside of my office in creating trust and transparency and empowering people. And once you get the culture situated, man, you can accomplish anything very, very quickly in what she did. So that's why I want you to pay particular close attention to Chapter 7. If you're a sales leader, an entrepreneur, or a CEO that's struggling, a lot of times the first thing you got to look at is you got to look at culture, and then you got to start to go to metrics, obviously. But culture is always the place where I start to get the buy-in, to get the results that I want. So I was really happy that he did such a thorough job of explaining how company codes should be installed. Now, overall, the book's got 5 main sections, but it's got a lot of different sub-chapters within the book. I was a huge fan, so many takeaways. I've never really heard someone talk about being a grandmaster when it comes to business and thinking 5 steps ahead. And the moment he did that, I was like, Jesus, how have I gone through life? I guess in some ways you do that when you lay out a marketing strategy and where you want to be in 1, 3, 5 years. But he really walks you through all of his core principles. Like even in Chapter 7, he has 6 strategies for replacement skills to transfer, right? So it's like if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's going to be leaving, or you start to hire more people, you got to what is my one special skill? And then what are the other skills I have that I can hire people that are better and smarter than me? So he has all these great 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to go through in the whole book throughout. He's a great storyteller. He's got great stories throughout the book. So overall, I was a big fan. 2 thumbs up for Patrick Bet-David's book, Your Next 5 Moves. If you're someone that is an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, you're a sales manager, you're a leader in any type of position, this is a book you have to read. It will help you dominate the competition, set yourself apart, make you think bigger, and give you the actual applicable tools to put in place right away from reading the book. It's 260 pages, so you can bang it out in a weekend. I read it. I started it last weekend. I finished it yesterday, knocked it out in a week. It's a very easy read. So well done, Patrick Bet-David. Also check out his YouTube channel, Valuetainment. I will put that in here. He interviews all kinds of great leaders and entrepreneurs and spiritual people, athletes, mob bosses. It has some incredible stories, a lot of good takeaways. So check out his YouTube channel as well. And if you guys haven't done so, please subscribe to the podcast, YouTube channel. I'd really appreciate it. All of my handles, tag me, let me know that you're listening, are at Tizer Evans. You can find me. The Book Legion has an Instagram, just the Book Legion, if you want to follow there as well. So really appreciate it if you subscribe. Thanks so much for listening.